Hey, welcome to Hanger Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this two-part series, Mike Calhoun and I sit down with Andrew Edgerton, the chief pilot of the Fairfax County Police Department. The Fairfax County Police Department is the largest law enforcement agency in Virginia, serving a population of over 1.1 million residents across Fairfax County. Well, Fairfax County borders the Potomac River with Washington, D.C., which is directly across on the northern and eastern banks. Andrew discusses his experience flying in and around Washington, D.C., which is arguably the world's most restrictive airspace. Andrew also talks about his journey into aviation and law enforcement, as well as the role of CFIs in training the industry. During the discussion, we talk about the use of civilian pilots in law enforcement aviation and the recruitment and retention issues in the field. We discuss the importance of crew coordination. We also discuss Andrew's transition from being an ENG pilot to a law enforcement pilot. Lastly, Andrew provides an overview of the Fairfax County Police Department and the opportunities available within the agency. Thank you to our sponsors Garmin, MD Helicopters, and Robinson Helicopters. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hanger Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hanger Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to Hanger Z Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gray. Honored to introduce today's guest. He's the 2024 HAI Salute to Excellence in the Law Enforcement Award winner. I guess you didn't win it, you earned it. So that's really awesome. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Andrew Edgerton. How you doing, Andrew?
I'm good. Good to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm really thankful that Mike Calhoun, who's our co-host today, introduced us and kind of got this ball rolling for the interview. Really neat to sit down and talk to you. And going through your background, you have a really interesting background, being that you work for the Fairfax County Police Department as a civilian pilot. You're not only a pilot there, but you're the chief pilot. And we've talked about, the different roles within law enforcement aviation, having a civilian pilot versus a sworn pilot. So it'd be good to kind of talk through some of that, with recruitment and retention issues that exist today in law enforcement and just public safety in general. I think a lot of agencies are looking for the solutions that you guys have employed with civilian pilots. And I'm excited to hear how that's working out for you guys and what some of your advice is on some of the pitfalls that you've experienced and how to prepare yourself for a role as a civilian.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Before we go much further, I have to say hello to Mike Calhoun. How you doing, sir?
Outstanding, John. How are you?
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for setting this up.
No worries. My pleasure. Glad to meet you face to face, Andrew, as well, and looking forward to seeing you at HAI as well. Yeah, it's gonna be a good interview.
Yeah, we're days away from HAI as we record this, so it'd be a lot of fun to get out there and meet everybody. The networking and training and education that we talk about being so important on the podcast is all at HAI. So excited to go there, and a lot of people put a lot of work into making it successful. So that'll be cool. Andrew, are you going to be out there the entire week?
I'm actually headed out Monday morning, and I'm leaving on Wednesday. I was going to try to stay through that, but I actually had a ski trip with my son already planned. So I'll be actually flying from LA back out to Salt Lake City to meet him out there and a couple of his buddies. So not going to make the whole thing, but hopefully get some powder turns in. So yeah.
Yeah. I love skiing. It's one of my favorite sports. Utah is one of the states I've never been to, and they always talk about the powder being super dry. Is that what you've experienced there?
Yeah. So let me preface that I'm actually a snowboarder. Been snowboarding since 1989. But yeah, that's true. If you've never been to Utah, you need to go there. Actually lived in Vail, Colorado for a little bit after college. So I know the difference. It's weird. It's just like squeaky feeling underneath like your edges. There really is nothing like it. So the license plate, greatest snow on earth is they're not wrong. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched to get out. You got to get out there and check it out.
Hey, you're an OG snowboarder. That's, back when skiers and snowboarders had this rivalry, and I remember in junior high school having to make a decision. Am I going to snowboard or am I going to ski? Because there was a distinct division between the two, and I chose to stick with skiing.
I'm an East Coast snowboarder, so let's big difference out there. We don't really have much snow, as much ice, but I grew up skateboarding, and then when it was it was a fad, kind of took on to it. I was lucky that my folks had a cabin, we could get up to the local hill quite a bit. So yeah, man, it's my knees still allow me to do it. I'm still better than my kids, but not for much longer. So,
hey, you brought up Vail. Vail and Mammoth Mountain are my two favorite ski resorts that I've been to in the United States. And speaking of Mammoth, Mike was just there. How was your experience at Mammoth this time?
Yeah, it was great. I don't snowboard. I'm not as brave. I know in me, I will get hurt. I get hurt. I can't work. I don't want, my wife broke her leg 3 times and, helping her through rehab and all that stuff. I don't want to do that. I take my kids, I watch them. They're great. They have a blast, but, Mammoth was great. We got up there the night we got there at 9:00, it started snowing and we had like 13 inches when we woke up. And so the cars were covered and I'm like, I grabbed my son, my 13-year-old son. I'm saying, hey boy, we're going to go out and shovel snow. You're going to, we live in Carlsbad. We live by the beach. We never get to do this. You're going to say I had to shovel snow when I was a kid. So we got to do that. It was pretty fun.
Yeah. I've shoveled my fair share of snow. If I never have to shovel more snow the rest of my life, I'll be happy. But that, based on where I live, that's not going to happen. So,
especially after Snowmageddon last year that you guys had to go through.
Yeah. I'm still scarred from that. In fact, that was this exact time last year, had to cancel my HAA trip because of the storm. But anyways, move on to drink of the day. A lot of drinks of the day are coming up at HAI. And so I'm prepping my liver, drinking lots of water, doing all the training that I can do to get ready. But for our conversation today, I've just got my Black Rifle coffee in my trusty Yeti mug. So that's my drink of the day today. Mike, what are you rolling with?
Early in the morning here, coffee as well in my Black Rifle coffee cup. So yeah, waking up.
I like the grenade mug. That's cool.
I like that too. I've had this for a few years. These are hard to get, man. When they put them on the website, they go like within a half a day or something.
Yeah. I've actually never seen that. That's pretty awesome. Andrew, how about you?
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
It's already afternoon for us. I had my Black Rifle coffee this morning, 2 cups, but now I'm sticking with my trusty McDonald's unsweet iced tea. So,
all right.
Nice.
Well, you can tell you're not in the South because you're in the South. It'd be sweetened iced tea.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So no, we got handful of pilots here, and that's our thing. Our thing is normally Chick-fil-A unsweetened iced tea, but we definitely not in the South.
I do have to say we're not sponsored by Black Rifle, but we're all drinking Black Rifle. So if anybody from Black Rifle is listening and you want to sponsor this part of the podcast, hit us up. Well, looking forward to meeting you guys in person and having some real drinks of the day at HAI. That'll be fun. The next segment we always get into, and I like these questions. It's the hot seat questions, and this is the questions that I've been asked quite a few times, but I love the perspective that it provides on the folks that we're talking to. So to get right into it, all the jobs we've had over the course of our life have led us to the positions we're in now. And every job, that you do, you learn something from and benefit from in some way, even if you hate the job you're doing. But looking back over all the jobs you've had over the course of your life, what's the best job you had as a kid, Andrew? And we'll start with you.
I've actually got 2 best jobs. So when I was 15, I worked at the local swim club, the one where I was a, swimmer, the textbook, neighborhood swim club. I was the gate guard. So I would check people in and all that. And it was hilarious because I worked with all these, high school and college girls and, didn't have the responsibilities of sitting up on the lifeguard stand and paying attention to kids in the pool. So it was like, it was a great job. Cause like I said, I hung out with all these high school girls and, never checked anyone's guest passes, just come in and all that. So that was a great job. But my other one was right after freshman year of college. I worked at the Spring Hill Exxon just down the street from where I grew up. So I was, slinging gas and selling cigarettes at the local gas station. So little convenience mart in there. But so yeah, it was a really interesting. I kind of laugh about that my gas job, because we still had full service then. You drive over, the ding ding thing would go off, and you could pay 10 cents more and get full service, and really put things in perspective with me on how people treated people. Because I'd go in there and there'd be parents of friends of mine. I'd have sunglasses and a hat on and my striped shirt on there with a name that wasn't mine. I was only there for the summer, so they never got me my own shirt. I think I have the shirt somewhere. I can't remember I can't remember what the name was, but I'd go check under the hood, wipe the clean the glass, and sometimes they'd just be super rude. My favorite thing to do is lift my hat up, pull my sunglasses down, and be like, hey, Mrs. Thompson, how are you? And it's just the look on the face. So that was a great. I mean, it was a great job right there.
Teaches you how to interact with people, and deal with difficult folks. Whenever I think of full service gas, I think of the movie The Jerk and the jobs that he did. And that scene where we're shooting at the cans, that's such a good scene.
He really hates these oil cans.
But I remember as a kid, well, I wasn't a kid, I guess I was in college. My dad had moved for a short period of time to Eugene, Oregon, and Oregon still had full service gas and California did not, at least that I remember. So I flew up there, my dad picked me up, and we go to the gas station, and I hop out of the car to grab the gas, and the attendant just about tackled me because it was a state law in Oregon that they have to pump your gas. And
it's like that New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just rescinded it in Oregon. We went on a road trip last year, and I experienced the same thing, man. I pull up, and I had known about it beforehand, but I forgot about it. And I pull up, and there's this tweaker looking dude, and he's coming up. He's like grabbing the gas pump, and I'm like, what's this dude? It's like, hey, you have a credit card, sir, or debit card? And I'm like, yeah, freaking back off, dude. And he's like, oh, sir, I got to pump your gas. I'm like, oh, that's right. Okay. I was like, oh, dude. Yeah.
You get so accustomed to homeless people coming up to you and begging for money. Anytime somebody approaches me at the gas station, I'm already defensive. I'm already like, hey, bro, I don't have any cash, or I don't, which I think is funny.
And then they come back with, I take Venmo or Zelle.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what?
Given the price of gasoline today, I think the last person anybody has any extra money is at a gas station, especially when it's costing $150 to fill up your car. I end up asking them for money.
Yeah. Help me out.
Yeah. Mike, on to you. What was the best job you held as a kid?
I had one job in high school. As a kid, in middle school, junior high, I used to help finish concrete with my a friend of mine. His stepdad owned a concrete business, and so a couple times we'd go and kind of help finish concrete. A lot of it was cleaning tools, cleaning up, doing grunt work. That was pretty hard. But yeah, high school, worked at McDonald's like everybody else until I got hit by a car. And my bike got tacoed, and so that was there. Began and ended my fast food career.
Yeah, talk about dealing with difficult people. Anytime somebody in the food industry has to talk to somebody, people either. Well, I think usually people hate the food. That's the complaint. There's never this is so good type thing. It's usually like, this was the worst. So you're always dealing with difficult people. I guess that kind of segues into worst job. So this is kind of what I was talking about. Even though some of these jobs we hate over the course of our career, they still benefit in some way. Andrew, for you, what was the worst job you can remember having?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking back on worst job, and I could go into the sweaty landscaping job I did and all that, but I actually jogged my memory here. Is summer before college, I had this job where it was kind of an office. I think my dad helped me get the position, and I'm not sure what the company really did, but they sponsored this big wine festival in not the Catalina wine mixer, but big wine festival in Virginia. There's actually wine in Virginia, believe it or not. I spent like 6 or 7 weeks in a conference room under a fluorescent light counting surveys.
Oh, wow.
I literally sat there like they were exit surveys from this wine festival. And I think that was kind of where I got my first taste of, if this is how a desk job's going to be, I'm not sure I want to do this, but yeah, I mean, it was boring. And I think I was just this schlep. They were, the boss said, we got to hire this kid for a couple months this summer. Just keep him. Yeah, what can we have him do? So yeah, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those things that sounds like it teaches you what you don't want to do,
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Mike, for you?
Probably one of the hardest jobs I had was I worked for UPS when I was in college. I was a unloader and a sorter. And man, especially at Christmas time, man, I remember they'd give you like 50 minutes to unload those doubles. And it's like grunt work, boom, boom, putting them on the rollers, rolling them down. They're coming by, yelling at you, and you're getting up at, it's progressively earlier start time the closer you got to Christmas. So 2:30 in the morning start time sometimes. And then I'd get off at 8 and then go right into school, right into class, and all that package dust, cardboard dust all over sometimes. So on Monday, Wednesdays, or Fridays, I had a 8 a.m. class. So I'd be like, kind of wash off real quick. And just like, I'm really not a homeless person. I just have a job.
It's funny you mention that. There's quite a few people I remember in college that did that, because you could work early morning hours, like, 2, 3 in the morning, and be done by the time school started. So that, for that reason, I guess it's good.
Yeah, it was hard though. Physically, man, it was crazy.
Yeah, a lot of those jobs, and one of my favorite jobs I had was work for the U.S. Forest Service as a firefighter. I think back to how physically demanding that job was. It's a young man's game for sure. And those, a lot of those jobs that we did when we were younger, thank God we did them when we were younger, because it's, looking at it now, I roll out of bed and hurt myself. So
there's no way. If I'm going to Costco and I got to buy cases of water, I'm stretching in the parking lot.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, man, I'm at that age now where, I can't even pull a hammy or my back lifting up a 40 count case of water, man. So yeah, I'm warming up.
Yeah, we make sure our boys are with us now. We go to Costco, like, hey, son, can you lift this up for us? So yeah, little hired help there. So the next question kind of feeds off the first two. The reason I think a lot of us work when we're teenagers is because we're paying for our car, either the gas or the insurance, or trying to upgrade our car for whatever it is you have. Think back on your childhood and your first car. What was your first car? Andrew, we'll start with you again.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Being totally transparent here, I was pretty lucky. I had a hand-me-down car, pearl white, 1990 Volvo 740 GLE with the most tinted windows you've ever seen and Florida tags, because it was my grandfather's, and he passed away, and we kind of inherited the car, and yeah, I was really, really fortunate to have a kind of a nice car when I started driving, and I got pulled over all the time because it had Florida tags and super tinted windows. So, but nothing to it. But yeah, I was pretty fortunate. So
they thought you were mule and dope from Florida up to
yeah,
totally,
yeah,
yep, it's exactly.
That's funny. Mike, how about you? You talk on your bike. So what was the next vehicle?
Yeah, I didn't have a car until, I was probably 19, I think. Yeah, but it was a 72 Volkswagen Carmagia, and it was pretty clean. I got really lucky when I got it. I saw it on a car lot in Garden Grove, I was delivering custom car wheels right out of high school, and I was driving my van, and I saw this car, and it was only $2,000, clean car Magia. So I flip around, talk to the guy, hey man, why so cheap? And the guy was actually a Porsche mechanic. And so he had it in his lot there by his garage. And I'm like, and he goes, I got to sell it. I'm moving back east, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you sure there's nothing wrong with it? Why is this so cheap? And he's like, I want to sell it like right now. So I was like, all right. So thankfully I went and saw my, my uncle, my great uncle that lived down the street. And he loaned me the money, and I paid him back like $100 a week. And I missed that car. It was great. Great car. It was fun. Yeah. The way it ended up, John, I'll tell you later when I see it at HAI. There's a funny story. The car is no longer with us, but it's a funny story. I'll tell you that later.
Okay. Yeah, the first cars, you guys are both fortunate. I love, usually the stories are, some Pinto, station wagon, or, the most hideous cars. And that kind of leads you to appreciate vehicles down the road. But yeah, it's always fun to dig through those questions. Again, Andrew, thank you for joining us, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know it's busy leading up to HAI, and you're working tonight, so we'll get you in and out so you're not, late going to work or whatnot. Yep.
No, it's all good. Happy to be here. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah. To start, you kind of prefaced a little bit about where you grew up, but can you tell us where you grew up and where you went to school and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually native Fairfax County, so grew up in McLean, Virginia, which is right inside, just outside the Beltway. So for those that aren't familiar with Fairfax County is, we actually pretty much are the western border from the Potomac River of Washington, D.C. So yeah, grew up in McLean, Virginia. I've pretty much been here my whole life for the most part, with the exception of college and then a year after college, but I've been in the DC area. I currently live over in Arlington, Virginia, which is a county that's actually surrounded by Fairfax County. I went to a Catholic high school in downtown DC. It was a public school product before that, but needed a little Catholic education there to get squared away. And then I went off to college up in Pennsylvania, small little liberal arts college. I went to go play sports up there in Gettysburg College, Pennsylvania. So
we just visited DC 2 summers ago, and man, that was blown away. Beautiful, beautiful city. The downtown DC area, I was shocked. Being in California, a lot of the federal buildings aren't the nicest, and so I kind of anticipated going to DC and seeing a lot of that. I figured he'd see a couple nice buildings here and there, but I thought the majority of it would be these older, kind of rundown federal buildings. Man, it was the opposite of that. Beautiful downtown DC. How cool that you got to grow up there. Can you talk about what it was like to grow up and kind of live the history that exists within the DC area?
I grew up right outside the Beltway, and it was pretty unique to be able to drive into DC every day for high school. And just sort of, I played on soccer teams, lacrosse teams with, and went to school with a lot of politicians' kids, right? So, senators, congresmen, vice presidents' kids, all that stuff. So it actually gives me a little unique thought on why we, not to get down this road too much, but none of the politicians live in DC anymore. In the 80s, everyone lived here, and we all played on sports teams. So you had people from other sides of the aisle at the kids' games on the weekends, where you're going to be cordial to one another. So it was kind of more of a family atmosphere. And I just don't think you have that anymore. Everyone flies home and goes home to their constituents versus, makes a home here. That was not the case in the 80s just because of the air travel. So, man, I got to do some really cool stuff around here. Like you said, it's a beautiful city. There are some things I've still never done. Lived here, said almost my whole life. I've never been up to the top of the Washington Monument, so it's on the list. But it's a neat spot. I have been at the top of the Capitol.
When we were walking around to DC, looking at the top of the Capitol, you could see all the snipers up top moving around from time to time.
Yes.
And then so that was kind of weird. I remember my son, he was like 10 at the time. He looked up at him and waved, and one of them waved back, and we were like, "Oh, he saw you." We thought it was a big deal. But yeah, going to the monument was really neat. Remember, it took a long time for us to wait in line to get to the top, and the DC park, I think it was the park police, were flying, and man, it was really cool to see their low level flight in and around that area. What a cool place to fly.
Yeah, no, that's United States Park Police, Eagle One. They're kind of our partners up here. They back us up quite a bit on stuff, and then working that P-56A airspace right there over the White House and the National Mall. So yeah, it's certainly a unique place. So
yeah, I'll kind of jump forward to your experience flying there. It's arguably the world's most restrictive airspace. Probably is the world's most restrictive airspace. How do you operate in an environment like that? Having to respond to emergency calls and stuff.
I'm gonna let you in on a little bit of a secret. It's actually really easy, believe it or not. Yes, it is the most restricted airspace, but we've been doing it for so long now that it's second nature. So it is the airspace where we're within the Bravos on Dulles Airport, IAD. My base is actually right on the edge of the surface area there. And then the flight restricted zone, the 15-mile ring around DCA, Reagan National Airport. So that special flight rules area goes out to 30 miles from DC. And then we have the small area called the FRZ, the flight restricted zone. Almost every mission of ours is within the flight restricted zone. The controllers there are fantastic. We have a great working relationship with all of them at Dulles Tower and National Tower. We are waivered to fly in that airspace. We actually we work with a group that's called the NCRCC, National Capital Region Control Center, that's staffed by every agency there is out there that keeps an eye on the airspace. We have to make notifications each time that we fly. But there's obviously some times when we don't fly unless it's absolutely critical. That would be like State of the Union that's coming up. There's always a big pilot deconfliction meeting on the State of the Union. We really just need to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's and make our brothers in the Secret Service happy. But we do a really good job of keeping them in the loop as what we're doing, and they let us do our job. So it's, as long as we make our phone calls, let them know, and that phone call is 30 seconds long. We get out the door and go get it done.
So if you're scrambling for pursuit, say, do you guys have a process like the TFO hangs back and places the call while you go start the ship, or what does that look like?
It's not set on who does it. Low priority. It's my pilot certificate, so I usually make sure I do it. Some pilots have the TFOs do it, but usually it's so quick you can make it. You don't need to stay back to go do that. So, but yes, some TFOs, we usually delegate that prior to the ship, but we do make sure it's a call out, our pre-takeoff checklists, once we're at throttles are in the fly position. I always ask, all right, has NCRCC been called? And, someone in the aircraft confirms it, but we're kind of we don't really run anywhere anymore. Nice and slow, and slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's kind of our philosophy there.
Yeah, I like that.
If there's an extra, I got an extra, flight officer, extra pilot. Hey, I got the call for you. Perfect. That they'll take care of it so we can get out there. But yeah, being that we do that, and there has been times, hey, I didn't call. Did you call? I didn't call. So then, you're sticking your phone up under your helmet, making that phone call.
Yeah. I like the point you made. It's your certificate, so you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. But it's interesting talking to folks that fly in complex airspaces, whether it's LA or San Diego or Dallas. Kind of the same answer that you provided comes up. I think it's just what you do, so you get used to it, and it doesn't become intimidating anymore. But for folks that find themselves in those areas that aren't there very frequently, it's it could be intimidating. Getting clearance into the Bravo or something like that. So pretty cool that you operate in that environment and the confidence that comes with that.
Yes, no, it's kind of interesting. I had my newest guy that I hired came out of New York, and I've done some flights up into New York on some other stuff, and I'm like, that place terrifies me. I can never fly up there. He's like, no, it's easy. Once he's like, I'm terrified of this airspace. I'm like, we're gonna. It's what you're saying is exactly true. So
Well, getting back to kind of your background and how you proceeded through your career progression, can you tell us how you got into aviation and kind of what motivated you to get into law enforcement?
I grew up around airplanes. My dad was just a private pilot. It's actually a CFI, but that was not his job. He was a telecom executive growing up, but he always had a love of aviation. He got into aviation because he was in I want to say in the 60s. He got sent out to the Four Corners area out there and was working on a power plant. And he tells me I was too dumb to realize that the company would have paid to fly me back almost every weekend. So he stayed out there and learned how to fly airplanes out there. And his dad, my grandfather, was a pilot, learned on a Piper Cub. So I just kind of had the love for aviation, growing up. My dad had a 172 and a Mooney growing up. And my dad and I still fly together. He's almost 83 years old and still gets out there and flies. So it's kind of a passion handed down. I saw Top Gun, wanted to be in the Navy and, go fly jets off carriers and sing to girls in bars, that type of stuff. And I think about 3 weeks after Top Gun, the third grade teacher called and said, hey, Andrew's sitting in the back of the classroom and is squinting and can't read the chalkboard. So then here we ended up with glasses. So those hopes were dashed. And so, anyways, kind of didn't ever really want to go on the be a commercial pilot or anything. Went to college, played sports in college, and then kind of followed in the family footsteps of getting in the telecom industry. However, learned how to fly right after high school, and then I bought a house and had my buddies from college live with me, and I rented my rooms out to them. And that's how I learned how to fly helicopters. So what I should have done was take that extra income from my three buddies that were living there and bought stock. I might be riding around in the back of the helicopter instead of flying one. But it was cool that, I never had to go into debt to go fly and just built my time up, flying Robinsons. So.
It's probably the most unique way I've heard somebody talk about cash flow in their license. That's pretty awesome.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was really lucky.
I was fortunate that my agency paid for me to go to flight school, and I felt bad. I'd be checking out at the flight school, and you'd have students that are paying their way standing right next to you, giving them their credit card. And I'm like, I always cringe when I'd see the bill that they're paying. But again, for you, really cool that you had a cash flow and a way to do it without going into debt. It's such an expensive process, No,
I can't imagine doing it now.
Yeah, it's so expensive. Mike, for you had your private before being selected aviation, yeah?
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com.
Yeah, I when I was working patrol, I paid for it myself, and went through Rialto at Western and got my private there. And but I hear that what you just mentioned, John, a lot about us guys in law enforcement when we're at the flight school and it's getting quote unquote paid for. And I had some discussions with some one particular instructor, and kind of made a kind of little disparaging remark about that. But the way I look at it is, we strapped on a gun belt and we went 10-8 a lot before we went to the aviation unit. So, and I get it, a lot of flight instructors, they're eating bologna sandwiches and everything, and it's tough and it's hard, and that's noble. But we didn't just have it handed to us, and like some guys think that, and no, it's, man, we pushed a black and white, strapped on a gun belt, a ballistic vest, and did a lot of stuff, doing some hard stuff. And I look at it as like, what, I paid my dues, and the department's investing in me here, and I'm gonna give a good return of investment with those certificates that they paid for. That's just how I look at it too. And hopefully other guys out there would look at it the same way and not feel like guilty, like I'm the only one benefiting from here, but
right. That's a great point. I touched a lot of gross things, a lot of gross people on my way to
Exactly.
aviation. So
Yeah.
I guess in that sense, I was making an investment through that, but yeah, it's a good point. And going back to you, Andrew, after getting your certificates, what did you do and how did you kind of work your way into where you are now?
It's kind of interesting. I was just kind of a ratings chaser. I had this thoughts of I'm going and doing all this stuff. While my career was in the telecom industry, which then kind of I left the telecom space and was in the recruiting industry where I would basically place salespeople for other organizations. So I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in not helicopter. However, the helicopter industry, I was making good money. I was having a comfortable living. I wasn't eating bologna sandwiches. I could afford to pay for my flight training. I could go and, I could go fly my dad's 172. I'm very, very lucky, very fortunate. I then, I built my time up. I would do, so I was never full-time CFI. And then I got the luckiest break I could have ever gotten. I got in as a backup ENG pilot in the DC area, flying an R-44. I think it was around 2008-ish. I got that job at 300 hours. I mean, right? How awesome is that? And that was, and I was flying 1,000 hours a year in that job. Not with an instructor, not as an instructor in an R-22 with a 20-hour student trying to kill me, right? So it's pretty interesting. I was my camera guy, Bill, who I still keep in touch with today. I mean, after all these years, I think he'd been doing it for 10 years, and I was his 29th pilot.
Wow.
Because everyone would go there and build their time up, and then once you had that magic 1,000 hours, you'd go on to your jet job. So, but that job didn't pay anything. It was so low. I still worked my job as a recruiter, so I would get up at 4 a.m, drive out, fly traffic and camera stuff from 5 a.m. till 8 a.m. Then drink a cup of coffee, do my recruiting job. Every now and then I'd have to hang up. It was a commission only job. I'd have to hang up and be like, hey, I got to go call you back. Go take a flight to go to a news scene, come back, do some more recruiting stuff, and then fly the night shift from 4 to 6. So, it's cranking out time. I remember my very first day there, I had it was an 8.5 hour on the Hobbs. So it's like, man, this is crazy. So
that was your first day?
That was my first day. It was 8.5 hours. I'm like, man, it takes me like 2 weeks to get that, like doing the other stuff.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Andrew, did you ever have to cover a live breaking news of a panda being born at a zoo?
No, never covered in live breaking news of a panda, but I did cover live breaking news that
Anchorman was fake then.
No. Yeah. One of the pandas from the National Zoo got to go they were taking it to a FedEx plane to fly it back to China. I hovered for 3.5 hours over
I'll take it.
Over that FedEx plane. So not quite being born, but being being driven to FedEx. We actually had to land early, go get gas at Dulles, which is it was $12 a gallon for avgas there, and go back up. They just wanted us up the whole time. So not quite a panda being born, but a panda being moved down the road. So
that's my Anchorman joke for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I like Anchorman. Yep. Interesting, being a 300-hour pilot, flying again, going back to the most restrictive airspace in the world. Was that difficult for you at the time, or you had kind of grown up in that airspace? You kind of knew what to expect.
Yeah, I grew up in it, but it was also by the time I had started really flying into it, all the restrictions had taken in place. So yeah, I was terrified by it. But then a month into it, I was totally fine, and the same procedures kind of exist for the news guys. They are not allowed. We weren't not allowed inside the surface area of Reagan, and that's still the case today. We were at a base just south of Andrews Air Force Base, so we'd fly right up the west side of Andrews. You'd see the Air Force One hangar up there. We're all security vetted and everything for that. Yeah, no, I remember being pretty intimidated back in those times, but then like you said, you get comfortable with it. It's no big deal.
That's super interesting. Looking back on all the news events you covered in DC, what was the most interesting thing that you remember covering?
It was pretty, be honest with you, pretty standard stuff. A lot of traffic. So we did a lot of camera stuff for ABC and CBS, but then would do for the local traffic. So saw all sorts of what we would call barbecues. So lots of barbecues. I think one of the big ones was the metro. We had a metro derailment back at I want to say it was 2009, 2010, maybe, which is really interesting because it was inside the area where I wasn't allowed to fly, so you had to get back up and just get this live shot. So it was it's not. During my time there, nothing really crazy. Just a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I just think again going back to being in the DC area. You have all these dignitaries from around the world showing up to two different things, and I just imagine there being a lot of interesting events that surround those politicians and those world events that are taking place literally in front of you. But I want to change gears just for a minute and talking about flight training. And in one of our previous podcasts, we had a conversation. Halsey's kind of the one that brought it up because he was a CFI. Talked about how in the U.S. it's interesting that we have CFIs who are most of the time, the lowest hour professional pilots that exist, training the new generation of pilots, and whether that's a good, way of doing things. And Andrew, being that you didn't have to kind of pursue that route, you got to do something different. Looking back, what's your take on how we do things currently? And is there a better way that you can think of to do what we're doing?
That's an excellent question. I think everything, everything in the aviation industry, and what I'm seeing now is everything in almost every industry seems to be driven by insurance rates, right? So how we have the lowest time guys teaching the no time guys out there is just boggles my mind. I believe in Canada, you have to have 1,000 hours or something before you have your instructor's rating. I look back at some of the stuff that I had to do, and it was terrifying. Going out there, you're 170 hour pilot going and doing this stuff. I'm actually right now helping a guy in his R44 and then another guy in his 206, an older model 206, and I'm much more confident in that now. They're both private pilots, but they're kind of working on their commercials, doing a little bit of ratings chasing. And, I look back at what I have that practical experience. I've scared myself enough where I can go and pass that along, just that knowledge of where I didn't kill myself, but you pretend, I think that I don't know how you're ever going to change that because, hours, you need this hour, you need 1,000 hours to go fly in the Gulf. You need 2,500 hours to go fly EMS. I don't know. I don't think it'll ever go away, especially in the pilot shortage that's going on right now as well. I mean, we see it in the airlines. So
yeah, absolutely. Mike, what's your take?
It's interesting. I'm glad that at least, when I've never been a civilian instructor per se, but I've been a CFI and former chief pilot in the unit, and I really liked the fact that I was training new pilots, but I had a bit more time myself. Like I went to CFI at like almost 3,000 hours, and so I had more time under my belt. And I think with that time comes the experience. I think in risk management, and there is a lot to be said in putting value and time into risk management. And the FAA is really pushing scenario-based training, and it's not just teaching to the PTS. It's okay. And I would train my guys to like on the we would progress into the search and rescue side. We're actually doing scenarios in these areas that are frequented by hikers that you will get a hoist rescue here. You will have to do a hover step here. So we're going to do it beforehand and get to teach them all of those things that have scared me in the past and the mistakes that I made because I had all that experience behind me. It can be challenging. Yeah. If you've got a very low time instructor that has a very low frame of reference teaching basically, pattern work, some offsites, and it's probably just enough to be safe enough. And then that's where you really start learning is afterward, and I think that is the most dangerous job in the world is an R22 instructor with a brand new pilot, especially, teaching autos or.
You just hit the nail on the head. It's the low time pilot teaching that, but you're just teaching to the PTS so that person can get a rating. You're just teaching them to take a check ride, and then they're done, and they may never come back again. So,
and hopefully that those students will come back on their own initiative and seek additional training and let's do some scenario stuff here. Like I need to go pick up a customer. Maybe they're at a winery or something like that. I've never done that. That's a very different sight picture, very different. You don't always have this nice, big, beautiful windsock right off your side. They're telling you exactly where the wind's coming from. So that's where you got to really learn. Hey, what does a downwind approach feel like? I don't want to know what that feels like, until I'm in it, the first time, so let's go practice that. I would do that with my guys too, but this is what a tailwind approach feels like. You feel that, you're pulling back on the cyclic and nothing's happening. That's a cue. Let's go around. And so you may not get that. You may not have the time to get that when you're going through like your private with a very busy instructor that's got a full plate. I'm seeing that a lot in the industry. We have one of our TFOs. She's getting her private fixed wing and didn't really like the instructor that she was with, wanted to go to a different instructor. And this person has a waiting list, and so she's like had to put her training on hold. So that's good. That's a good instructor, but there's maybe some not so good ones out there. And then, gosh, man, I can only fly with this person maybe once a week because they're so busy.
I was fortunate. I got to go to Hellstream in Orange County to go to flight school. And I remember passing my commercial. Rod's he owns a company. He's famous in Southern California for sure, but arguably the United States and maybe even the world. But once I passed the commercial, his statement to me, and I know it's not a license, but he said, "You now have your license to learn." Like that was his congratulatory statement. And it's true. Like you said, that's now you go learn the specifics for the missions that you're accomplishing and how to fly in those environments. So I like that. And I believe in that for sure.
Yeah. Rod's a great examiner. I've sweated through many a check ride with him. Very uncomfortable sometimes. And he's a very gracious man for sure.
Absolutely. It's great to talk about stuff like that because, I think what exists here on the West Coast is the same on the East Coast. And just interesting to kind of compare some of our experiences as far as that goes. But being that you spent time as an ENG pilot, you were over probably a lot of active law enforcement investigations, pursuits, those types of things. How did that help you when you decided to transition to law enforcement as a law enforcement pilot?
Thank you to our sponsors, MD Helicopters. MD Helicopters is a leading light helicopter manufacturer for civil and military operators worldwide. We build safe, agile, hard-working light helicopters that consistently deliver reliable performance. As a result, our operators enjoy superior confidence, backed by durability that enables more uptime.
I'll tell you how I got there real quick. I ended up seeing that there was an opening for a civilian pilot at Fairfax. I applied knowing that it was a long shot. I went out there, met with the chief pilot at the time and everything. I ended up getting the job offer. I got the job offer on a Wednesday. On a Friday, the Metro Networks who ran the helicopter, it was a Westwood One company. So I got called on Wednesday that, hey, we're going to give you the job pending a background investigation. Congratulations. Friday, Westwood calls me and Metro Networks calls and says, 2 more weeks of flying and this R-44 is coming to Atlanta. The contracts are done. You don't have a job anymore. So you want to talk about getting lucky. That's how I got into Fairfax. Oh, and in 3 weeks from that phone call, my wife and I were going to have our first kid. So you want to talk about a stressful, interesting time. But to kind of it's a long way of getting to your question is that the similarities of what I learned from ENG to bring over to law enforcement was number one, working in a crew, right? So my camera operator, Bill in the back, it was my first introduction to crew coordination of working together and accomplishing something as a team. And ultimately what that was positioning the camera on the helicopter so he could do his job. It's essentially what I do in my job.
What a concept.
For the most part.
Yeah.
What a concept. Position. So, having that EMG background and flying the camera, that's it, man. And crew coordination right there. That's two very, very important concepts right there, as you guys know.
If I was in your interview panel, I would have hired you just based on that response.
Kind of doing the same thing. Yeah.
That's what I said. I mean, we're kind of doing the same thing. So yeah.
What cameras were you using? Do you recall on the ENG ship?
I have no idea. I had probably have a picture somewhere in my office around here. I can read it, but it was just a daylight, just a daylight camera, pretty average. It wasn't even HD or anything like that. Do you remember when we went from the switch from regular to HD? I remember when they got rid of and everything was only being broadcast over HD in the air. I was actually flying when they made that switch, and we watched that disappear off of, because we didn't have any way to get HD in the aircraft anymore. So we just had an antenna to go pick up our feed. So that's kind of dating myself there.
I remember for a while it was a big deal. In the news helicopters, the local ones would have HD on the side of the ship. It's kind of like when you drive down the interstate and you see the no-tail motel and it says color TV on the thing. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. For Fairfax County, is it common for them to hire civilian pilots, or were you one of the first, or what does that look like?
When I joined, our staffing consists of 6 pilots, so a chief pilot and then 5 pilots. When I joined, I was replacing a civilian pilot who was retiring, who'd been there approximately 10 or 12 years. Older gentleman, Vietnam era pilot, flew in the 12th Aviation out of Davison, then came to Fairfax. I want to say he was one of the first civilian pilots. So when I started, there were 4 civilian pilots and we still had 2 sworn pilots. So the chief pilot who hired me was sworn. And then there was one other gentleman who was still sworn. So I want to say that I was probably maybe the 5th or 6th civilian pilot that's ever been hired there.
Interesting. So obviously it had been working out, and that's great.
I think when I went and asked someone the question the other day, I think it was 1998 or 1999 when we brought on I think more 1999 when we brought on our first civilian pilot.
Going back to the police department as a whole, it's interesting looking at the name Fairfax County Police Department, at least being in Southern California, because a lot of the county agencies for us are sheriff's departments. Can you talk about what the police department looks like as a whole? How big the agency is and what kind of positions are available for those that are working the ground?
Fairfax County is roughly, like I said earlier, it borders Washington, D.C. to the west of the Potomac River. We have roughly 1,400 officers, approximately 1,400 sworn officers, approximately 850 officers on the street working patrol. The rest are in detectives and specialties. One of the awesome things about Fairfax is the resources that we have. So, obviously helicopter division and patrol, but our operations support bureau, we have a full-time SWAT team, EOD, K9. There's all sorts of opportunities. We have a boat team since we're on the Potomac River. So a lot of resources over there. And it's a big county. As far, what's really interesting is approximately roughly 1.2 million residents. During the day, Monday through Friday, that goes up to 2 million because of all the people commuting in for work. Our location, we have a ton of government contractors there, lots of tourist destinations, gigantic mall at Tyson's Corner. There are businesses that support the government. Chances are that they're based in Fairfax County. So that's have our own academy and specialized driver training track. With the range and facility. So, our resources are pretty excellent here.
I think I know the answer, but is your agency facing similar recruitment retention issues that are being seen throughout the rest of the U.S. and worldwide? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're no different than any other agency out there. So things are getting better. There's some recruiting bonuses and everything, but same thing that's going on out worldwide is happening to us too.
Looking at some of the fixes for that, I think part of it lies in leadership. And Mike, that's what I love about your guys' sheriff. He's at least in California, he's sticking up for law enforcement as a profession and for the folks that are in the industry. You talk about how that's affected your industry and some of the recruiting for your agency?
We've enjoyed a pretty good recruiting pace because of our sheriff. During COVID, we hired a lot of former LA sheriff's deputies and LAPD officers that got terminated and came over to our agency, and we're still enjoying a pretty good recruiting pace because of those conditions that he sets with his leadership, and got excellent pay and just a great training, great pay, and great place to work. If you love being a cop, man, in Riverside County, it's all you can eat, man. There's a lot going on. Unfortunately, yeah.
Somebody who backs aviation, he's built your guys' program to what it is now, and he's done a lot for you guys. That's great to see. Again, leadership has so much to do with all those different aspects of the job.
Yeah, the latest thing that he approved for us is we have our very first paramedic in paramedic school. So we're going to be an ALS program here in just under a year now when he gets back. We have another guy that's going to join him. He's a deputy out in the desert, and he's going to be joining us. He's a current paramedic. He kept his certificate active, and so he's going to join our team as a rescue specialist. And so when our first guy, Mike Doyle, gets back, we can cover both sides of the week, 7 days a week straight. They'll be on opposite sides of the week. We'll have a paramedic on board. And I know EMS too, it's been very tough lately. I know in our county, it's getting tough to staff ambulances. Mercy Air, they closed at our base. So there's only one other air ambulance in the county, and they're out in Thermal. They're like a 30-minute flight away. And then the other one's in Oceanside to the south. So, our governing EMS agency in the county has been kind of like since Rescue 9's inception 3 years ago. It's like, hey, how fast can you guys become paramedics? Because it's been tough. There's been times where we rescue an injured hiker off the mountain, and they'll ask us, hey, can you just transport direct to the hospital? Because we can't even get you an ambulance for 2 hours. We're like, yeah, sure. If you guys are cool with it, yeah, absolutely. It's just a broken ankle or whatever. So
wow,
it's tough, man. Everybody's feeling it.
Yeah. That'll change the dynamics of the whole program, having ALS, availability for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where we've had folks that needed at least an IV established, and let's just transport direct to the hospital. Cuts out a lot of that, landing, shifting, loading, taking off, another landing, all that delay, a lot. It's just so much cleaner and better for the patient. We can just transport direct.
Andrew, you guys have a really interesting cross section of public safety on board. You guys have a HEMS mission as well. So we've got, potentially a civilian pilot, a law enforcement TFO or crew member, and a paramedic on board as well. So you kind of got these three different folks or segments working together to accomplish a mission. Can you talk about, from your perspective, some of the benefits and some of the challenges that you've seen being a civilian pilot and now chief pilot with your agency?
Our crew makeup is actually three. So civilian pilot, and then 2 flight officers. And my flight officers are also, so they're sworn officers, 4 years on the street. Then you can apply to any specialty. I think it's 2 years now. They bumped it down for the specialty. So 2 years on the street, then you can apply to a specialty. And so all of my TFOs are also paramedics. So whoever's sitting in the back seat today, they're the lead medic, but the seats, the front left and the rear left are interchangeable seats. So, which I'll come back to this, but that's why we've been successful on the civilian pilot thing, because we are flying with a crew of 3, and I have 2. I just call them TFOs, but they're TFO paramedics. So. And the reason why we fly 2 paramedics is the state of Virginia requires 2 care providers, and the minimum of that must be a paramedic. So, a lot of the private air ambulances are flying flight nurse paramedic, but we fly paramedic. that's kind of our mission makeup there. But as far as the civilian pilot thing, I think that's why we've been successful in integrating into the civilian pilot, because you're not just up there as a fresh fresh new pilot that's gone through our indoc training, with potentially a newer TFO that's only done 2 or 3 pursuits. You've got a breadth of experience over there in your left seat, and if you can just have that helicopter do what those guys or gals need to do, then it is a difficult job. I'm not trying to put against, but you can accomplish that mission.
Was it challenging for you in the early days coming in, kind of getting an understanding of how to work a scene and what some of your responsibilities were outside of just being a pilot in that seat?
It is a huge, steep learning curve, right? I didn't know I knew nothing about public safety until they handed me a flight suit. My dad was an EMT back in the 80s, but I just, some people have public safety in their blood. And I just wanted to go fly helicopters. Now it's in my blood. I love it. I mean, it's like the greatest job ever. But yeah, there's a steep learning curve. There's things that I've seen that I never ever thought I would have seen in my time. So I'll kind of point back to an experience now as flying. So we will go down to pilot and single TFO paramedic. However, we'll be, if we have a staffing issue or something, or if we're running a second aircraft, we'll just do law enforcement missions. And I can recount one time where I was flying with a relatively new TFO, been cut loose for maybe 2 months on a pretty dynamic scene. And I went back and watched the recording, and I kind of I was doing a lot more than I typically would do. And I kind of use it as a training thing for one of my new pilots. It said, at some point in time, you're going to need to know how to do this. The time's not now, but you need to start building towards that. So I've just gotten, after 15 years of doing this, I've just gotten better at it with time. Even though, I've never worked a day on the street. Yeah, I've done ride-alongs, ridden with the canine guys, I've been put the bite sleeve on, but that doesn't really count. It's just the time I spent up there doing it and learning and watching the other crews and debriefs and everything. Yeah,
I think having a three-person crew is a huge advantage. Whether you have a civilian pilot or sworn pilot in that seat, having 3 people to do that job is amazing. I wish that we could do that. So that's a great way of doing things, and a lot of Europe and UK, that's how they're operating a majority of the time.
It's really nice to be able to delegate some tasks. So if we're doing a vehicle pursuit, and the way it runs is my front seat TFO is kind of, we'll talk on the radios, and then we'll run our mission mapping system, and then the rear seat TFO typically runs the camera. But you can do we have radios in the back. You have access to the mission computer in the back, one hand controller. The front seat also runs the searchlight, but if we're running, about to run into another jurisdiction, the back seater will lock the camera on and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and program your radios for you. So the ability to delegate the tasks, so the front seater is not just always heads down. Sometimes I'll even step in and change some radios for them. But that's when we're getting really fast saturated. My job's to fly, and but that extra brain and those extra fingers are awesome.
I think when it comes to having a sworn pilot, some of the challenges that I think we face is getting sucked into the call, because we're so accustomed, a lot of us, to being a TFO and doing that job. I noticed it myself a few times, and I had to pull myself back. You really hyper focus on where the suspect's running, instead of being, what you said, the pilot, and making sure that the aircraft is operating safely. So I think that's the challenge that exists for sworn pilots, and not that it doesn't exist for civilian pilots, but I think the point you brought up is maybe relevant, that I think the risk of getting sucked in isn't as high, because you've done things differently from day one.
I would say I definitely agree with you. I would say the risk of getting sucked in is greater the more you know, and the longer you've been at the unit, and also potentially on what your background was. Different backgrounds sort of lend to what your level of potential engagement is based on how long you've been there. So, I've got one guy, he's great. And he's more, not to a detriment, he's more heavily involved because that's where his background was as a scout pilot, being independent out there with him and another pilot in the OH-58. So it's a good asset.
I think one of the benefits that I see for a swarm pilot, you talked about some of your ability to change radio frequencies and do some of those things that make an effective crew, I guess, effective in a critical and dynamic incident for a pursuit that's going through multiple jurisdictions in LA County and the LA Basin. Some of those cities that you're going through are literally a mile long or 2 miles long. So the odds of you having to change frequencies at TFO is really high. So when you have a swarm pilot who understands what those jurisdictions look like and how to operate and navigate these different channels, helping the TFO is really helpful. Again, barring it, you don't get sucked in to the incident and you're not paying attention to what's happening. But when you look at how you've kind of developed your training program as a chief pilot, what advice do you have for agencies that are looking to bring on a civilian pilot? How do you make your crew, how do you make that new pilot effective as a non-swarm pilot out the gate?
This is the end of part 1 of our conversation with Andrew Edgerton. Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsors, MD Helicopters. MD Helicopters is a leading light helicopter manufacturer for civil and military operators worldwide. We build safe, agile, hard-working light helicopters that consistently deliver reliable performance. As a result, our operators enjoy superior confidence, backed by durability that enables more uptime. Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R-22 to the R-66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Thank you for supporting the sponsors who make these conversations possible. I wanted to plug an upcoming episode of the Hangar Z podcast that was recorded in conjunction with the Vertical MRO podcast. This special 2-part series we recorded with Chris Stone and her working dog that many of you met at HAI this year, Canine Torque. We also had the privilege of talking to the Huey Vets crew. The Huey Helicopter Association dedicates itself to several important causes. Firstly, they aim to ensure the rich history of the Huey helicopter is not forgotten. Secondly, the association honors the veterans of the 135th Assault Helicopter Company and all those who served in Vietnam. Finally, they provide support to veterans struggling with PTSD and other invisible wounds of war. You won't want to miss this unforgettable 2-part series of the Hangar Z and Vertical MRO podcast.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.